Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Sean Butler TV. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love with those that you love doing them with. If you're new around these here parts, then please hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy the content, smash the like button for me. I'm sure you know how much it really helps the channel out. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's video, which is all about Saturday's football roundup. This is Sunday morning. Today we've got Liverpool versus Chelsea in the Carabao Cup final. That is the reason why Liverpool didn't participate in any of the fixtures yesterday, and neither did the other team in the top six, Tottenham Hotspur, whose Premier League opponents would have been Chelsea if it wasn't for today's Cup final. So 4 of the top 6 teams did play, and it presented opportunities for all of the 4 to either close the gap or extend the lead on their various targets. Aston Villa trying to secure a top 4 place. We're going to talk about them. Manchester United trying to close the gap on Tottenham Hotspur. Bearing in mind, Man United were 11 points adrift of Tottenham Hotspur not that long ago. And thanks to a better run of results, I'm not necessarily going to say form from Manchester United, because I'll be consistent. I think they played absolutely woefully at times for the majority of this season, but still found a way to get the points. When a team barely draws, you're either going to win or you're going to lose. And Manchester United have been on the right side of a lot of tough fixtures, but have been, I'm not going to say fortuitous. Maybe it's the sign of a good team or a sort of resilient team if you can play badly and still win. But does that count if you do it all season? I'm not entirely sure. Either way, they closed the gap to 3 points. And if they had won yesterday against Fulham at home, which is usually a team that you would say that Manchester United will expect 3 points from. 18 games of an unbeaten stretch against Fulham is, or was, the record before yesterday. Quite fascinating encounter, but dear oh dear, Manchester United were awful. We're going to talk about that. Tottenham Hotspur obviously relieved that the 3 points gap wasn't closed, and then goal difference would have been the only separator, with Tottenham having to face Crystal Palace, a resurgent Crystal Palace next weekend under a new manager, with a new manager bounce, Oliver Glasner. His team taking all 3 points against Burnley with a resounding, I think it was a 3-0 victory. Quite incredible there. So a tough fixture for Tottenham coming up next weekend. And then, of course, you have Arsenal, who played Newcastle late last night. They played at the final fixture just after Manchester City found a way to scrape past Bournemouth. And I'm going to say scrape past because hats off to Bournemouth. Let's start with that particular game. It was the 5:30 kickoff. Manchester City needing the 3 points away at Bournemouth, a team that you would usually expect to sit there and park the bus when Manchester City come to town, try and defend for your life, hold on like beavers, and then if you can find a way to break away and steal a goal and maybe pinch a draw, or in a dream world scenario, pinch the points. That's usually the setup, or at least it has been, but not for Bournemouth, not under Iraola, not anymore. This team have full confidence in themselves to be able to go and play football, whether at home or away from home. They make it difficult for all teams. They made it very difficult for Tottenham, despite us getting the points at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium a few weeks back. But Manchester City came and they did what great teams do occasionally, which is play badly, but still get the points. But Bournemouth were very, very unlucky, in my opinion. It took 2 or 3 saves, world-class saves from Ederson, to keep his sheet clean. And, of course, it took a little bit of pressure in the sort of mid-stages of the first half for Manchester City to get their goal, to get that lead. But once that was done, the game was toe-to-toe, end-to-end, and a proper fight. It wasn't an easy day at the office for Pep Guardiola, despite his mega money stars turning up against a relatively inexpensive Bournemouth team. But fair play to Bournemouth, fair play to their fans for cheering them on all the way to the 90th minute. And as I say, Manchester City I don't believe, deserve the victory. I think that a draw was a fair result. But in any event, they got the 3 points. So the pressure turned to Arsenal. Liverpool having a week off, they still sat top of the table, but Manchester City closed the gap to 1 point. Arsenal, then, it's their turn, and they have to take Newcastle United to the Emirates for the 8 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday night. A tricky fixture on paper. Newcastle United riddled with injuries. We know they're nothing like the team that they were last season on the road or at home, because of their injuries, because of the distractions in Champions League that ultimately ended with them getting kicked out of the group stages of the Champions League and avoiding all future European competition. Arsenal, on the back of a terrible performance, a really awful performance in Porto midweek in the Champions League, and questions were being asked. Are Arsenal on the blip? Is this a slip? Is this like a blunder that's going to roll over into their Premier League form, which has been absolutely flawless for the last 4 or 5 weeks? They had that stumbling block where they lost a couple of games in December, I think it was, and people were thinking, oh, here we go. The Arsenal of the first half of the season that wasn't particularly playing fantastic football, wasn't particularly playing its best version, or the last season's version of its high-flying football was, why was that? Was the kind of question that was being asked. Are they coming back down to gravity? People were coming up with theories that Arteta has realized that he needs to keep some stamina, some energy back for the second half run-in against a Manchester City team who usually do kind of come into their own in the second half of the season themselves. And listen, if that's the theory that was put out there, then it might just be absolutely nail on the head stuff, because let's be entirely honest, since the second half, since the turn of the season, we're coming home for the second half, Arsenal have been in absolutely scintillating form, winning all of their games in fashion. And yesterday was no different. They were frightening. Arsenal were absolutely frightening at times in that first half. The way they cut through Newcastle United, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, even Kai Havertz picking up and getting into weird little pockets of space. Very difficult to pick up for the Newcastle United team that isn't blessed with pace at the back and obviously does have those injuries. But listen, Arsenal aren't without injuries as well, don't forget. They're missing a few of their best players, or a few of their sort of top tier players. And so to play the football that they did throughout that game, consistent pressure, consistent from basically the first minute until the last, and never took their foot off the gas. Newcastle United got a consolation goal towards the end, but 4-0 up, Arsenal and Arteta are cruising in, and now they can turn their attentions and focus on trying to overcome Porto. You know what's interesting about the Arsenal scenario is I'm not entirely sure. Are they going to go on and win the Champions League? Their pedigree in Europe is not the same as it is in the Premier League. I think all Arsenal fans will admit that. They don't have that kind of European heritage. Should they be able to get past Porto? 100%. Was the game away in Europe a blip? Well, we'll find out when Porto comes to town. Don't forget, last season, Arsenal got knocked out of the Europa League to Sporting Lisbon at home. And it might not just be that Arsenal can beat any team on their day at the Emirates. Maybe European caliber teams, maybe European football is just a different thing and they haven't quite figured out the energy for that yet. And when you consider that if they were to get past Porto into the quarterfinals, if they were to go the whole way, they'd have to play an additional 7 games of football between now and the end of the season. When they're competing with teams that are more used to doing it, Liverpool, an absolute favourite for the Europa League, and will want to go on and win that particular title and should be able to get to the final. And Manchester City are favourites for the Champions League, should be able to get to the final and go on. Maybe it's in Arsenal's best interest to allow those two teams to focus on having those additional 7 games in their league and having to fight on all those multiple fronts, and Arsenal just focus on the on the Premier League. If they were to do that, if they were to be knocked out against Porto, I'm not saying that there's bigger fish to fry. I'm not doing anything like that. I don't even care. I don't have a dog in the fight. But for me, I just find it interesting. I would think it would be interesting to see how Arsenal fans would feel about the idea of removing that kind of hurdle where they're not really a European. They haven't really demonstrated their European pedigree any time recently anyway. And maybe knowing that City and Liverpool have those additional games, will it give them the edge in the title race? If they were, I'll say it right now, if Porto were to beat Arsenal in the second leg and knock Arsenal out of the cup, I might go and change my mind entirely and say that Arsenal can then become the favourites for the Premier League, because there's only 2 points behind them. And when you look at the form, Liverpool's injuries are insane. Liverpool are riddled with injuries from top to bottom across the pitch. It'll be very interesting to see if either of the two 50-50 shouts in Nunez and Salah play today. But if they don't, if those injuries are more meaningful than we think they might be, then Liverpool really are a team that, whilst they're getting it done, only having lost 2 games all season in the Premier League, those injuries are going to add up. Manchester City's form is not that spectacular. They haven't been playing particularly well. They're getting the job done. As I said, a sign of a good team, a sign of a champion team that can play badly and still win. However, they have a lot to do, and Arsenal are scary. Their football right now is by far the best of their season and by far the best in the Premier League. And so it's going to be a fascinating title race, and one that I'm locked in for. I'd love it if Tottenham had been involved, but they're not this year anyway. We're nowhere near good enough. And you know what? I don't think anyone else is. the three teams at the top of this table are miles ahead of everybody else. But just beneath them, you do have Aston Villa. They played yesterday in a helter-skelter roller coaster game with Nottingham Forest. 4-2 was the eventual outcome. But when Aston Villa take a 3-0 lead going in at half-time, you're thinking it's an easy day at the office. And Aston Villa was scintillating and thrilling in that first 45 minutes. Absolutely clear-cut and clinical, going and putting the ball in the back of the net. It looked like an easy day at the office for them. But you know what? Nottingham Forest are a weird team, a bit of an enigma that never seem to lay down and die. And they do sniff out opportunities, and they are clinical in their own regard when the opportunities present themselves. And they did in the early stages of the second half. Nottingham Forest come right back into it. It's 3-2, everything to play for. Ultimately, though, Aston Villa then get the fourth, put the game out of sight, and Aston Villa take the 3 points to create a 5-point lead over Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham didn't play, obviously, and they have to wait and to play Crystal Palace, a team, as I said at the start, I think I said it at the start, that is under a new manager bounce, Oliver Glasner, a team that will hopefully, a player manager that will hopefully let Crystal Palace sort of spread their wings and play a little bit more when they get their full injured players back into the roster. So Aston Villa extend the lead over Tottenham Hotspur in fourth place. Tottenham Hotspur remain in fifth. No game today, no game yesterday. But Manchester United, who had the chance to close the gap to goal difference between us and Tottenham Hotspur, between them and Tottenham Hotspur, played Fulham and were appalling. They were absolutely atrocious. I mean, it was a great game to watch as a neutral. I was obviously rooting for Fulham, but listen, I think that the tactics that Erik ten Hag put out were just woefully inept, playing players out of position, an imbalance. I think that for me, the kind of par for the course for Erik ten Hag's time at Manchester United this season, at least, is every single game there is an imbalance in the team. The best player on the pitch for me, I thought, in the first half for Manchester United was Onana, keeping the ball out of the back of the net 2 or 3, 4 times. Fulham could have been 4-0 up, 5-0 up before they actually got their first goal. Fulham were scintillating, a brilliant team that didn't care. They weren't scared at the playing at Old Trafford, and deserved every single thing they got. And as I say, it could have ended up going awry. In about the 88th minute, Manchester United finally got a little bit of a break, finally got the goal that leveled the score. And then, of course, Old Trafford erupts and they're trying to suck the ball into the back of the net. The noise was deafening, even through my TV. And you're thinking, as a Tottenham fan, you're thinking, oh, no, how has this happened again? Manchester United playing terribly, but they're going to get this. They're going to sneak this. You just know it. You feel it. But Fulham didn't give up, and they broke quick. And once again, their two boys from Nigeria step up, Alex Iwobi and Bassi, and get the job done. 2-1 to Manchester, 2-1 to Fulham. Manchester United fans furious. I've been watching the kind of fallout on social media and on YouTube. You've got the likes of Mark Goldbridge who are blaming the players. You've got the likes of most of the other channels that are saying Ten Hag's got to go. A lot of kind of partisan biases that are being on display. People that have made their kind of put their stake in the ground regarding Erik ten Hag. And when this sort of performance comes out and is on display, they then have to double down and say, it's not the person that I've defended, it's the rest of them. And I think, to be honest, as a neutral that doesn't have a dog in the fight, no, I think there's obviously a little bit of both, right? I think that Manchester United's team is not good enough. The players are not good enough, just like at Tottenham, not to make this about Tottenham, but under Conte, people like myself were saying Conte's football is horrible. He's not good enough. He blames everyone but himself. But the other side that didn't blame Conte were blaming the players. And of course, the players weren't good enough. And if you're going to do a rebuild and a process and a project, then you need to change everything. You need to change the people who are making the footballing decisions in the boardroom, directors of football, scouting departments. You need a new manager, hopefully new coaches. And obviously, you're going to need to get rid of a lot of deadwood. And at Manchester United, they are at the start of a very long project because they don't have good enough players. But for those people that think that Ten Hag is the guy, he isn't the guy. He really isn't the guy. His in-game tactics for me are shambolic. His decision-making around the substitutions are atrocious. And he looks like a guy that's waiting to get his kind of P45 and his settlement check. But Man United find a way to hang on. Look, they are sick. They are still only 3 points behind Tottenham. And Tottenham's form, for what it's worth, is so volatile and up and down. And of late, it's been more down than up. That it wouldn't put it past, I wouldn't put it past Manchester United whatsoever in any way, shape, or form to get into that top 5. I think that Aston Villa at the moment, of the 3 teams, 4th, 5th, and 6th, that are fighting for the top 4, Aston Villa's form over the whole season has been the best by far. They have been more convincing. They have played with more conviction. They have dominated more teams more consistently and more frequently than either Tottenham or Manchester United. And so if you had to give the 4th placed position to the team who deserves it the most, then I do think you give it to Aston Villa. However, Aston Villa have got the European competition to fight for in the Conference League, and you better believe that Unai Emery wants to win a European competition. That's his bread and butter. Are those additional possibly 9 games? I think they've got an extra 2 games. I think it's 7 or 9 games if he gets to the final. Is that going to be a distraction for Aston Villa? Well, look, Tottenham have got to go to Aston Villa in 2 weeks' time at Villa Park, which is going to be a ridiculously difficult game for Tottenham. However, one of the things that will suit us or boost our chances a little bit is that it is sandwiched. That fixture is sandwiched on the Sunday at 1 o'clock between Aston Villa's first leg away in Amsterdam to Ajax in the Conference League. And then the following Thursday, I think it is, they have the replay. And so, are Aston Villa going to be focused on Ajax? They're probably the most difficult team they could have picked in that Conference League knockout round. They're going to have to travel to Ajax. They have to focus on that. They'll be tired after the game. They have to return back. They don't have a massive amount of recovery time. Does that put your thumb on the scales in Tottenham's favour just a little bit? Time will tell. But that particular fixture is definitely going to be massively influential in the overall run-in, both for Villa, for Tottenham, and of course for Manchester United. Tottenham have got 4 or 5 ridiculously difficult games in April, back to back to back. We are going to be playing against Liverpool City and Arsenal, all in a variety of, in about the space of about 2 weeks. And so, Tottenham Hotspur might not be in the title race, but they're going to have a lot of influence on and over the title race. For me, I think it's a fascinating top 6 finish to the season. 2 different battles, 3 different teams going for it. With all due respect, I don't believe Brighton or Newcastle or West Ham or Chelsea are going to have enough to get in there and be a part of that conversation. And so it's likely that the top 6 is organised now, and just figuring out the order will be what we focus on for the rest of the season. As a Tottenham fan, I'm all about trying to finish the season as strongly as I possibly can. But you know what? I think you could make the argument for Manchester United and for Tottenham that not being in the Champions League next year and being in the Europa League might be a better place to focus on for where we are at in our relative projects. By this time next year, Tottenham will be 1 year, or by this time in August, Tottenham will be 1 year into their rebuild. United will be kind of just starting their own or getting through the first few months of it. And maybe the Champions League is a bridge too far, a level too high, even though, of course, you're going to sit there and make the counter argument that it's all about revenue, right? The more revenue you get, the more you can spend on the sort of players that can level you up in the first place. And so being in the Champions League is the best possible place. Maybe the best outcome for both teams is to shoot for the stars, land on 4th if you can, or 5th, by the way. Don't forget that the coefficient point system is not figured out yet. And that's what's going to be fascinating about that, is that it could be teams like Aston Villa or Arsenal or Manchester City and Liverpool, in fact, who go deep into their various European competitions that end up, if they do well enough in those, that then end up taking their eye off their own prize in the Premier League, which allow teams like Tottenham or Manchester United to take advantage and land in 5th, and by default then earn that additional Champions League spot. It's going to be a fascinating roundup, guys. But yeah, look, Liverpool-Chelsea today, I haven't got a dog in that fight. But there is a video that I put out a couple of days ago that if Chelsea were to win that particular battle and lift their first cup under Pochettino's reign and qualify for the Conference League, then the financial consequences for Chelsea and the additional tightening of rules regarding the UEFA FFP, or the profit and sustainability rules as it's now known, may mean that Chelsea will be in breach of UEFA rules, if not the Premier League rules for financial sustainability. And so they may win the title, but then turn down the chance to play in Europe. And I'm not sure that should be allowed, if it is allowed, just to avoid punishment. But there's a whole video about that you can see right here. Go and check it out, guys. But also like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know your thoughts. Who wins the title and who wins the top 4 battle? I'll see you on the next one, guys. As always.